Hello and welcome into the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield Anchor reporter Brent Barnett, filling in for Megan Grebner this week, and joining us as always for the update, University of Missouri's Scott Brown. Scott, how are you doing today?
I am doing good, Brent. Thanks for doing this today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for joining us as always. And Scott, it's a kind of a shortened week. We're heading into the Easter holiday weekend, and might just start off the top, having you break down what we saw this week in the markets.
Yeah, Brent, if we start with cattle this week, so really through Thursday, live fed cattle prices about $3.70 higher this week. Those feeder cattle markets tended to be higher this week. Oklahoma prices in particular, $4 to $10 higher on the week. On the future side, the June live cattle futures contract was up about $1.15, and the May feeder cattle contract was up 25 cents. We also saw gains this week on the beef side. Choice box beef up $7.30. We had strength across the board in all of those components of that choice box beef price. On the hog side, cash barrels and gilts through Thursday down $1.65. We also saw June lean hog futures down $3.35 on the week. The pork cutout value also lost $1.90 this week. All those components were lower. Hams and bellies certainly led to some of the lower pork cutout values that we saw this week.
Scott, how much are we watching weather issues here in the coming weeks as it relates to planting, alfalfa, and even input costs?
Yeah, so for sure, Brent, it was nice to get planting intentions out last week, and producers saying 92 million acres of corn. Now we need to get those 92 million acres of corn in if you're a livestock producer who wants to see some cheaper feed down the road. So spring planting certainly on tap. And I'll say on top of that as well, what are some of these areas that have experienced some pretty serious drought from a hay and pasture condition look like as we look ahead? And I think we're seeing some improvement in that drought conditions, but we don't have a lot of subsoil moisture, and it's going to take timely rains to get us some good pasture and hay growth this year.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've seen a lot of attention this week on the blizzard conditions in parts of South Dakota. A lot of livestock producers impacted there.
Yeah, for sure, and many of them trying to be in the middle of calving right now. You kind of wonder what that does in terms of losses as a result of trying to calve in some pretty tough conditions. So we'll have to wait and see. I think all of this just continues to point to the tightness we're going to see in cattle markets here for a period of time, and probably gets us still higher prices as we look ahead.
Scott, let's take a look at the weekly slaughter numbers for both cattle and hogs.
Yeah, so through Thursday, Brent, which is the day we have right now, a run of cattle of 488,000 head through Thursday. We had run 505,000 for the same period a week ago, and 491,440 a year ago. So down slightly this week relative to last week and year ago levels. On the hog side, a run thus far of 1.924 million head through Thursday. That's 0.2% higher than where we were a week ago, and 2.3% more than where we were a year ago. And when you start to look at the year-to-dates, not surprisingly, we're seeing year-to-date cattle slaughter down 2.3%, while hog slaughter up 1.7%. Any
concerns there, Scott, on the slaughter side of things?
So not a whole lot. I think we'll continue to tighten in terms of cattle slaughter. So I think the down 2.3 in cattle will continue to grow as we go through the year. On the hog side, perhaps here in the short run, we're going to get some slightly bigger runs. So when I look at the hog side, more production coming, maybe demand that's been softening a little bit, maybe more concern for producers there in terms of where hog prices go for the next at least 6 to 8 months.
What are we seeing on the trade front? Can we take a look at some of the monthly trade data?
Yeah, so we did get trade data out this month or this week, and so it gives us our February 2023 numbers. If we start on the beef side, USDA told us 250.8 million pounds of beef exports out of the United States in February. That was actually down 3.7 million pounds from where we were a year ago. When you start looking at some of the breakout on that front, China, February of this year, down 2.6 million pounds relative to where they were a year ago. A lot of other countries that don't make the top 4 or 5 for our export destinations on the beef side were also down about 7 million pounds. So you take those 9.6 of everybody else in China, and it more than offsets what was a 4 million pound increase in what was headed to Japan in February. So a slowdown relative to what we saw last year in terms of growth, in terms of beef exports. On the pork side of the equation, some better news, continued better news. Pork exports for February, 504.2 million pounds. That was 18 million pounds over where we were a year ago. And when you look at year to date on the pork export side, we're up 63.5 million pounds. China's part of that. China for February up 6.8 million pounds relative to a year ago. But just like for beef, but on the other extreme, so all these other countries that typically don't make our top 4 or 5, we're up almost 25 million pounds in February. And that's what I think is really giving us some growth on the pork side of the equation.
Yeah, and export sales were fairly strong this week. Scott, what are some of I know you've already touched on some, but any other global factors that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things that we have to keep watching. So number one, what's happening to some of these world economies? We keep pushing interest rates higher. There's signs economies are slowing. Does that have any big effect on meat demand, or ultimately what maybe the United States can ship to some of these countries? That's top of mind, of course. And then we'll have to continue to watch disease activity around the world as we watch a big ASF outbreak in places like China could certainly be positive for U.S. exports of pork to that country. So we'll watch that, as well as avian influenza.
Now, you mentioned China coming in and making some pork purchases. Mexico showed up on the report this week as well. Do you expect to see some sustained pork sales to Mexico?
So I think we certainly have the opportunity. Hams have always been very supported by what's been headed south to Mexico for us. I think that opportunity continues to exist. Growing them as much as we have the past couple of years, and I say growing exports to Mexico, I think that gets to be a little bit tougher as we go ahead, but I do think there's some opportunity for more growth this year.
Very good. Scott, we had a jobs report this week.
That's right. Brent, we finished the week here with giving us 236,000 jobs in the latest jobs report. That was jobs added in March. Continues to talk about maybe an economy that's still adding a lot of jobs. Now that jobs number, I think, came in a little bit below pre-report estimates in terms of what the trade was anticipating. But I do think there's still this concern of, do we need to work on slowing the economy more, raising interest rates to try to slow some of this job growth? Now, unemployment stayed at 3.5%, so not changed there. It'll be interesting to see where markets open next week, given this news on the jobs front.
Scott, that's going to do it for us this week. Looking ahead, what are some of the reports that we need to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so a big week next week. We are going to get USDA's monthly WASDE report out early in the week, and then we also get information on retail prices, and finish next week with a report on consumer sentiment.
Looking ahead there, what are some of your thoughts or expectations for the supply and demand numbers?
Yes, I'm curious what USDA is going to say about production, given the acreage report, planting intentions report that came out, as well as we've been seeing USDA raise cattle price estimates for this year and lower hog price estimates. Do they continue that in this report? That will be, I think, top of mind for me out of the USDA report next week.
Looking forward to seeing what comes out in the report. Scott, thanks as always for joining us on the program. Hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, have a happy Easter.
Same to you. Again, Scott Brown there with the University of Missouri. And to have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your inbox every Saturday, you can go to our website, brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there. And for a rundown of what happened in the markets day to day, feel free to check out the Market Minute from John Perkins. Have a great weekend. I'm Brent Barnett for Brownfield.